Howard Beck rejoins the show to give us the latest buzz around the NBA. Is Miami stuck waiting for a decision from Damian Lillard? And if not, is another star-level player an option? Plus, which players are on Miami's radar, and will the Heat re-sign their own free agents? All that and more on today's edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, here as always with David Ramil. However, you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. We're joined now by Howard Beck to help us talk about the Heat's options this offseason, if Gabe Vincent or Max Strus should be their top priority, and other stars who could be on the move. But we'll start where we always start these days. Damian Lillard, who will reportedly give the Blazers a chance to improve the roster in free agency before making his decision. Details leaking out as to whether or not the Trailblazers are lukewarm on Tyler Herro, what it is that they could be looking for in free agency. Howard, we're talking daily about the Lillard situation. But do you think that there's a scenario where he chooses to stay in Portland over trying to get his way to Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Miami?
Have we reached like hashtag Dame Watch level yet?
Oh, yeah.
It should just be that.
He's having dinner with Draymond Green. I mean, apparently, I don't know who's wooing who, but I mean, that's worth noting, right? I mean,
he's playing Will Smith songs in Paris. We're one step away, Howard, from tracking his plane.
I was gonna say, are we tracking the tail on the jet yet? That's the key moment. That's when you know things have really reached peak offseason. So I talked about this at length on Zach Lowe's pod the other day. We got deep into this while waiting, literally, like, because it was the day after the big meeting, and it was like, this could happen anytime now. And we're like, what is this going to happen in the middle of the pod? Should we, delay when we're going to tape? Because for a while it felt like maybe something was really, I don't want to say imminent, but that maybe things were moving. Gears were clicking. Here's my best read / interpretation, however you want to frame this. It feels to me like this is Damian Lillard saying, show me, don't tell me, right? They've got a window here. They did not trade the number 3 overall pick. They used it to take Scoot Henderson. They have not indicated any willingness or desire or impulse to trade any of their young guys. Although maybe Anthony Simons will be the one on the move at some point here if they're going to try to improve in the present. And Damian Lillard has made it very clear about what he wants, right? If I'm staying, I want to stay because we're getting better and significantly better. So it feels to me like there's a window here. And I'm not going to predict anything, but I think if at 9:01 Eastern, 6:01 Eastern? 6:01. I keep screwing this up. I think it's 6:01 Eastern.
It is.
If it 6:01 Eastern, time zones are hard. If there's an immediate Jeremy Grant re-signs with the Blazers for $1 gazillion announcement, tweets, whatever, and or a few other things that seem to indicate that they are all in on fortifying with veterans, then maybe it's, we go down to DEFCON 2 or 3 instead of DEFCON 1. DEFCON 1's the worst one, right?
I have no idea. I'm not a
military. I think DEFCON 1, I think people invert it all the time because you think the bigger number is the bigger magnitude of
all the DEFCONs are bad, I think.
All DEFCONs are bad. We don't want to be on any DEFCONs. But I think DEFCON 1 is the most alarming, sounding all the alarms. I think we move off the DEFCON 1 to 2 or 3 if it looks like they are making moves to fortify the immediate ability of these Blazers to get further with Dame Lillard on the roster. And my guess is that that's what he is waiting for. If we don't see that, if they're just hanging on to all the youth, if they're just making some, kind of surface level moves and just bringing back Jeremy Grant, like, well, okay, cool. But like, you already had Jeremy Grant and you weren't going anywhere with him. That can't be enough. So if there's not significant movement, significant additions that would convince all of us outside of there that, oh, now they're really in business, I don't know why it would convince Damian Lillard either. So I think it's the kind of thing where it's like it bears watching until we see where they're going. And again, just guessing, just reading tea leaves, and just, bringing to bear all of my years of covering this league, I got to think that if Damian Lillard doesn't see something convincing in the first few days of free agency, maybe that will be enough to tell us where this is heading. And maybe it won't even take a few days. So I'm not getting you off of Dame watch anytime soon, I guess, with that answer.
But wouldn't signing Grant, or an announcement or tweet about signing Grant, kind of be like an indicator that they don't have that much money to attract any other free agents, or am I reading that wrong?
No, I mean, listen, like a lot of teams, whether they re-sign their guy or not, they're probably not in a great position to go out and get guys. Maybe there's a sign and trade involving Jeremy Grant that brings back more pieces. Maybe it's just bringing him back. And then, listen, at some point it has to be other moves, right? Yeah. Can they get anything out of a Nurkic trade? Skeptical. Can they get anything out of an Anthony Simons trade? Yes. How much? I don't know. But if you are determined, it's funny. So like I said this the other day, it feels to me like the Trailblazers are doing some version of the Warriors 2 timeline plan, except without all the championship equity built in and without all of the great players still around who won championships, right? They are straddling 2 eras here. They are holding on for dear life to the Damian Lillard era, which I get. It's understandable. I wouldn't be eager to trade him either. But doing that while also trying to hold on to the post Damian Lillard cast, Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe and Anthony Simons and whoever else, doesn't feel like a real tenable position. You can't do both. You can, but you're not going to be good in the present. Right. And so something has to give, and that's what I'm waiting to see. What's going to give? Are they going to give up some piece of the future? Can they get it? If they're holding on to Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe, and they're only willing to trade Anthony Simons, does that bring back enough to convince Damian Lillard that they're back in business?
Yeah, you keep mentioning something has to give, and it's a kind of a terminology that we've heard a lot. Like, this is just so obviously heading into a place where both sides, it would be better for both Damian Lillard and for Portland just to kind of part ways and figure out a future without each other. But, easier said than done. Easier for us to say than for the Trailblazers to pull that trigger, for the Damian Lillard to maybe request that trade. It does feel a little bit like maybe both sides are looking at each other and wondering which one's going to blink first. Are you going to ask for the trade, or am I going to trade you if you're the Trailblazers front office, I guess? But how, like, you've covered the league long enough, Howard, like, you've seen a million trade requests and superstars on the move. Like, how is this different in your mind? How does this kind of, like, why is this different? Because it feels like, obviously the equity and the long time that Dame has been in Portland is a big part of it. But what does it say about Lillard's personality, his relationship to the city? Kind of just, I guess you could just, I'm rambling, but you could take it anywhere you want to go.
No, not at all. And I totally get what you're saying, Wes. And I think this is different. There aren't too many cases where a guy has been with a team for his entire career, had a spectacular career, obviously without the jewelry and without the finals appearances. But, Damian Lillard is at worst the second best, but by most accounts, best player in franchise history. You want to argue him versus Clyde, or probably throw a couple others in the mix there who might have had shorter spans with them. But, I think Damian Lillard has a claim to best Blazer in history. He's on the 75th anniversary team for the NBA. And the reason this one is different than a lot of other ones we've seen, I often refer to, like, I usually use the phrase either discontented superstars or disillusioned superstars, right? And so that's the James Harden forcing a trade, or Kevin Durant forcing a trade, or, LeBron James leaving in free agency. It's usually something very crystal clear where the two sides have kind of worn each other out, or just they've reached a dead end and it's obvious. And the star himself is just like, you know what? It's just time to go. Or Paul George doing it kind of in a year in advance, where it was like, I'm going to be a free agent and I want to go to LA. That's where I'd like to go. So you should trade me and get something for me instead. And then they sent him to Oklahoma, but he found his way to LA eventually. So normally it's like that, and it's very clear. And we hear murmurings way in advance of this player really wants to get to a bigger market, or a more glamorous market, or closer to home. In this case, home is Portland. Like, yeah, Damian Lillard is from Oakland. He's a Bay Area guy, but he has, made his home in Portland for a long time. He has expressed repeatedly, and I think very sincerely, this is where I want to be. But every player at some point, maybe not every player, most players at some point at that level, superstars, have a breaking point where it's like, he's going to be 33 in a couple of weeks, July 15th, I think it is. I should know that by heart because I've had to look it up like 17 times by now to talk about when he's turning 33. Like, that's a kind of a inflection point for guards, right? Even in this era where guys can be great, much deeper into their careers. Look at Steph, look at Chris Paul, but it's coming, right? That cliff is coming. And what do you still want to accomplish? If he wants to stay in Portland and have them keep trying to build around him, and even if it's, there are no guarantees of championships in this league. So there's no moves they could make that guarantee him anything. You can guarantee him a deeper playoff run maybe, or more hope for a deeper playoff run. But if he wants to stay and be some combination of, still franchise cornerstone, who's going to try to lead him as far as he can, and at the same time mentor Scoot Henderson, mentor Shaedon Sharpe, be the bridge to his own post career, to whoever's following him, he can do that. And it's a perfectly honorable thing to do. But he has said enough times himself publicly that he really wants to see them make some near-term moves. And so this is where I say, like, something has to give, because right now they're trying to preserve the future while still having him on the roster in the present. And it just, they haven't made the playoffs the last two seasons. So what reason is there to believe that it's going to change? So it's unique in that regard because of how fiercely loyal he has been, and the fact that he clearly does not want to ask out. He is giving them every opportunity to make it a palatable situation and a more promising situation. And I absolutely respect that. But I do think that there are limits to what they can do if they're not going to give up their two biggest young pieces. And because there is that limit, I'm skeptical that they can get to a place where it will look like they're truly a deep playoff team. The West is crowded. Everyone's getting better. There's at least 13 and maybe all 15 teams that are actually going to try to win next season. No one's tanking anymore. So, and some younger teams are coming quickly, Oklahoma in particular. So I'm skeptical that they can pull this off. It doesn't mean that Damian Lillard will ask out, even if the rest of us think that there's a very good case for him to do so.
I think the thing that gets lost in this is just how patient Damian Lillard can afford to be. He doesn't have to rush. He could say, and I think that's what he's doing. He's giving Portland every chance.
Yeah. No, just sorry to cut you off. It reminds me of this, which is that, some people I've talked to over the last week around the league have said, like, no, there's not going to be a trade immediately because he's going to give them, as you're saying, Wes, every opportunity. But where that might change is you get into the season, and if this newly fortified, reformatted roster can't make headway and they're still struggling in mid-late to late December, that might be the time where he finally goes back to them and says, all right, guys, we gave it a shot. Thank you. But let's figure something out. And maybe he's a January trade as opposed to a July trade.
Yeah, I think that's definitely in the cards. There's also the Trailblazers part of this too. Just minutes before we started talking here, the new CBA was officially released and to teams. So maybe there's something on that end where, hey, like, we want to get this far below the tax. I'm not a CBA guy, but like maybe there's something in there that motivates Portland to do something sooner rather than later. But we'll see. For the Miami Heat's perspective, they can also kind of be patient here. They've got their own business that they need to take care of. That's something that they can always try to revisit or visit, I guess, if and when Damian Lillard does decide to request a trade. We expect that they're going to be involved in that, whether it's June, July, August, September, November, whatever it is. So if not Damian Lillard, what other stars could be on the move? What are Miami's options other than that? We talk about that next here on Locked On Heat. But David, first tell listeners about our sponsor.
Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. How does it work? You just pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. It's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available, and you can get those numbers on the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, men's and women's college sports, European sports, disc golf, boxing, you name it, you'll find it over on PrizePicks. Entries are easy to make, 60 seconds or less, and they're safe and fast withdrawals when you win. They're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com today to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can also get a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 if you use the promo code LOCKEDON. So you get the $100 deposit match if you use the promo code LOCKEDON. So make sure to download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com today to start playing daily fantasy sports.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Everydayers, we will be back tomorrow with cap expert Keith Smith to break down the new CBA and what's possible for the Heat in free agency. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. All right, let's move on from Dame. Howard, in your offseason preview piece for GQ, an executive from a team told you that he was expecting fireworks this offseason, or some version of fireworks. There's a lot of metaphors involved in there, but what are some other situations around the league, related or not related to the Miami Heat, that you're keeping an eye
on? And the fireworks, we were trying to gauge. I was trying to get the gauge of like the fireworks scale. Not quite 4th of July. He was like, maybe more like Memorial Day. And then we finally said or maybe like somebody's championship parade where people are just firing off their own neighborhood stuff, right? Some bottle rockets. Not full blown, like here in New York, where we have them like firing off over the East River and the Statue of Liberty and like 5 other places. And if you get up on a roof, you can actually see like 5 different shows going on at once. It's
Would that be a Lillard trade? Would the Lillard trade be on top of the roof in New York City? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. In fact, that's how I'm going to figure out on Friday night if Lillard has been traded. I'm going up to the roof and I'm just going to look out on the horizon. And if I see a lot of fireworks, boom, there it is.
It's the new Twitter people.
Yeah. To be followed shortly thereafter by a parade down Flatbush here in Brooklyn.
There it is.
I'm not saying they're winning the thing over the Heat. I'm just saying, I do think the Nets have, if they want to, they have the bigger, better package to offer than the Heat do if the Blazers want a ton of picks. Anyway, other things I've got an eye on. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of like top level stars. A lot of this comes down to like, how do you define star or superstar? Mm-hmm. I think it's inevitable. I think that there's a clock ticking on Karl Anthony Towns in Minnesota. I don't know that this summer is when it's going to happen because they're heavily invested in the idea of Rudy Gobert and Towns together. So having only had a third of a season to see them, I do think that they're going to want to give themselves and their players every opportunity to make it work. But they've got cap issues and tax issues coming down the pike. And there's just a fit issue, frankly. And there's just the cat has been there for a long time and they've never gotten anywhere with him issue. So I wouldn't be surprised to eventually see a cat trade. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Knicks move Julius Randle, for instance. But again, what tier of star are we talking about? He's made a couple of All-NBA teams in the last 3 years. That's something, but he's flamed out in the playoffs too. And that's also something. And, the league has seen the same. Does Zach LaVine qualify as a big time, star trade?
He's in Doritos commercials or Gatorade or something.
It's not nothing, right? Yeah. A bunch, yeah. It's funny for a player at his tier. It's incredible how many commercials we saw him in for about a 2-year span there, right?
Yeah. Jordan Poole had a year after the championship where he was in every
Wasn't that just
too.
NBA.com or NBA app commercials though?
Yeah, you're right. But that was like
those don't
on
count.
League Pass. It's like every break you see that. So yeah, I was inundated with it. But yeah.
those don't count. Like Tristan Thompson was in one of those for a while when the Cavs were really good with LeBron there.
Well, he had a Kardashian wife, though. I mean, that's a different strata right there.
We already did DEFCON levels. We did fireworks levels. Now we're like ranking commercial tiers. Like what level star are you versus what kind of commercial you're in?
How many years after Chris Paul has retired will we still be seeing Chris Paul State Farm commercials? Are those forever? Are we going to all go to our graves still watching those?
Yeah,
probably.
I think so.
I think we've reached
they're gonna keep switching out like the main guy and just keep Chris Paul there.
I'm ready for a new State Farm spokesperson. All due respect to Chris Paul, who's had a phenomenal career, and I really am curious to see how he does with the Warriors. It's great. Other guys on my list. So I've already ridden this merry-go-round on Paul George, where a few weeks back somebody had said the Clippers are in a mode where, because Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, both going into final years of their contracts, probably don't want to extend either or both. organization's obviously reached a certain frustration level with how often one or both are injured. Don't be surprised, I was told, if the Clippers found a Paul George trade. And then but the draft passed, and the next day someone's telling me, yeah, I don't think they're doing that anymore. I think they're just gonna they're just gonna give it all one more shot, bring it back, hope these guys get healthy, stay healthy, and finally have the deep playoff run that was expected when they brought them together in 2019. That said, if the right thing came along, I still won't be surprised. I don't know if they're actively trying to shop Paul George, but I don't know that they're married to this group anymore either. I don't think they are. So maybe it's just a matter of the right thing coming along. I've got my eye on a couple other situations that are I always hesitate to say it because the stupid aggregation machine out there, but I'm not a big optimist on the long-term viability of Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. Ooh. I was not that high on it personally when I first saw them acquire Mitchell. And then I was, I live here in New York. So I was, at a few of those Knicks Cavs games, and, you could chalk it up to them being still kind of new together. You could chalk it up to Darius Garland being in the playoffs for the first time and being a little deer in headlights, but it's a smallish backcourt where both guys are best with the ball in their hands. And we've seen various versions of this over the years, over and over and over. Just ask Dame Lillard.
Easy to recall, yeah.
Dame and CJ, Dame and Anthony Simons,
Right.
And we've had various versions of this over the years. And it's especially in today's NBA where big wings are so influential. It just feels like that will have a run, but it's too soon to speculate on that. They're going to give that at least another year.
Chris Fedor, who covers the Cavs, reported, right, I think it was today or yesterday, that there's no interest there on trading Darius Garland. And if that holds up being true long-term, then obviously the guy that would be on the move, if Mitchell. That were a split, would be Mitchell. And that's a guy that interested Miami as early as last summer. So that's interesting.
So and so listen, as I say, every caveat possible, I'm not hearing anything. No one has whispered this. No one has said this. This is just my observation. There are certain situations out there where you look at it and you go, I don't know that that's working or is going to work. Maybe one of these guys is available eventually. And so that's another one. But that's it, guys. Pascal Siakam, are the Raptors ever going to trade anybody? They may not.
Well, can I throw one other Raptors name out there? Because interesting little development. We get those emails about the odds of team that's going to get this player thing.
You get those too? I thought
I
only would have got those. I think 17 times a day.
The interesting little development on this morning's mass email. The Heat have the second best odds to land Fred VanVleet if he doesn't return to Toronto. That doesn't make sense since VanVleet's a free agent and the Heat don't have cap space, but maybe they can get there by salary dumping or waiving or stretching Lowry, Oladipo, Duncan Robinson. Maybe they can create something where they're able to get under that hard cap that would be triggered by a sign-and trade, where that would allow them to maybe move Lowry, for instance, back to Toronto for a fan. I don't know, something like that. I just found that interesting. Yeah. Also, I don't read too much into those odds, but I just thought it was interesting that Miami had the second best odds behind Houston for VanVleet.
David, what we've learned today is that you read these emails more closely than I do, Wes.
I am it's just easy content. It's such easy content. Look, we just made content. David, can I throw a name at you that we haven't talked about on the pod? DeAndre Ayton. DeAndre Ayton.
Oh, I thought they were committed to keeping him in Phoenix, right? I mean, I think the idea is, see how far that can go. Obviously, they've got some roster building of their own to do around Beal and Booker and Durant, but I think right now it seems like that makes a lot of sense. Are you saying Ayton in terms of a Miami? Oh, yeah. No. I mean, an interesting name there, but I just don't see how that's viable. I don't think Miami has the requisite pieces or anything of interest. I mean, I guess
all you need is JaVale McGee and Tim Hardaway, apparently. But
is that a current rumor? I mean, there's a lot to parse through.
Mark Stein reported that I think this was Stein's report that there was an Ayton Mavericks discussion on draft night, and that the Suns are the one who rejected it because it would have included it was Hardaway. McGee was the one that the Suns didn't want. Right, the Suns have had him before, so I don't know.
I think it was Rashawn Holmes with Hardaway.
Yes,
plus McGee, and Phoenix didn't want to take on the McGee contract.
Yeah,
and then Dallas backed out. I guess who knows what would have ended up happening, but
Can Miami offer Phoenix a lightly used Cody Zeller?
No, I think it'd be like, I mean, if that's the price, it's like, is like Duncan Robinson and Haywood Highsmith enough for Phoenix? Like, it seems like the market on DeAndre Ayton is so incredible. I don't understand what's going on with Ayton, but I don't know. I don't think it's viable next to Bam. Like, Ayton has experimented with the 3-point shot, not necessarily experimented with making the 3-point shot, but
I'm not in for that one either. I think if Ayton's gonna get moved, it's gonna be, I would think, somewhere else, and they need to get back real pieces, like serious rotation players.
All right, let's talk beyond the stars. We'll talk about what free agents are a good fit for #Heat culture. We got names. It's coming up next here on Locked On Heat. Back here with Locked On Heat. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Every dayers, we're going to be back tomorrow with cap expert Keith Smith to break down the new CBA and what's possible for the Heat and free agency. So make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. Before we get to some of the outside free agents who could be fits for the Heat, they do have decisions to make on their own free agents, most notably Gabe Vincent and Max Strus. Howard, based on what you've seen, what you've heard, and all these things, what do you think the Heat should value more? Who should they value in terms of Gabe Vincent and Max Strus? Who do you think they should value more? Who do you think would have more value on the open market? That might be one question. It might be two different questions.
When you guys sent over topics in advance and I saw that one, I went, oh man, this one's going to break my brain. It's actually really tough. I tend to feel like in today's NBA, positional versatility and size matters more than a lot of other things, right? I'm not saying you can't find another Max Strus or find another Gabe Vincent. Like both of them, you can find another one of in some form. But I think I lean toward the size and defensive and positional versatility of Max Strus over Gabe Vincent. Gabe Vincent went to the same college as my wife, so I don't want to alienate the Gauchos out there.
Or her.
I never.
Or my wife.
Yeah, that's the priority, I think.
So I got to root for my fellow UC folks. I'm a UC Davis guy. So I think if you had to choose between them, I think I would go with Strus, but there's probably some other element I'm overlooking here. I think you can get another guard. Also, like the Heat have not, and maybe they should have one, but they have not operated with a traditional kind of playmaking point guard, right? Like it's Jimmy, organizing the offense, and sometimes it's Bam bringing the ball up the floor, and then you've got an older Lowry doing it sometimes, but they've never really had. And I don't know if you actually absolutely need some traditional point guard. I'm not even sure if Gabe Vincent is really a traditional point guard for that matter. And I don't know. Where are you guys on this?
I think Strus has more value on the open market for all the things that you already said. He's got a bigger body of work in terms of 3-point shot making. Mm-hmm. He's a 37% career 3-point shooter. Gabe Vincent had one good year. It was like 36% from three. Other than that, he's been 33% or below from 3-point range. So I don't know how believable that shot is. I mean, he caught fire in the playoffs, and that was great, and that was the biggest stage, and that's obviously going to help his value. But I also think that Miami is motivated to move on from Kyle Lowry, and if they do end up waiving and stretching him or salary dumping him somewhere else, then they need somebody that plays the point guard position, and maybe they could bring back Gabe Vincent, where if Max Strus does leave, you still have Duncan Robinson. So I think maybe in terms of roster balance, they would prefer to bring back Gabe. My sense is that they prefer to bring back Gabe. Also, he's probably going to be cheaper than Max Strus for all those things that we talked about. And this is a team that's sort of up against it cap-wise. So I'll be really interested to see where Max Strus ends up, because there's already been some rumblings about maybe even more than the mid-level exception. Chicago, Cleveland, Orlando, Indiana have all been mentioned as potential names. So we'll see what ends up. It seems like the market's going to be pretty frothy for him. It's also not a great free agency class.
Yeah, which means that people may overpay for second or third tier players.
Yeah.
We'll see how many teams actually have the full mid-level available to them. This might be the summer of the salary dump, just because everybody's trying to get their books in order with the new CBA coming in and all of the tighter penalties. I mean, the John Collins trade is still like shocking to me. Yeah. Just a straight up salary dump. Like you got next to zero back. Like that is. Yes, you got back two things: a barely still NBA player Rudy Gay and a second-round pick that is as close to trading something for nothing as you can get in this league. And for a player who had a very, frothy market in terms of interest on the trade market over the last couple of years, since he was literally on the trade market for like 742 days or something. And there were definitely opportunities along the way there for them to have traded him for more than Rudy Gay and a second-round pick. So this is the summer. This may be the summer of the salary dump. Just teams just trying to get their books in order, and because of that, like it's going to be hard to gauge spending beyond the obvious ones, right? Like James Harden is going to go back to the Sixers probably on a gajillion dollars, and Mavericks will figure out how many millions to give Kyrie Irving, and then everything else is going to be smaller.
All right, let's do this last thing quick, auction draft style. Just throw a name out. We can sort of bat it around. Free agents, not currently with the Miami Heat, who might be fits for sort of hashtag Heat culture and what we think and know that to be. David, do you want to go first?
Well, it's a name I mentioned to you. I've mentioned on the show before, but I think there's a strong tie between this player and the organization. Dennis Smith Jr., I think, is a name that certainly appeals to Miami. I'm not sure what he'd command because he did show out to be a pretty plus defender in Charlotte, but obviously he's been with 6 teams now in 6 seasons, so it's been a very difficult ride for him. But
almost a football team.
Yeah, almost a football team, if you want to count that. 6.5 then, I guess. So, yeah, I think he's a good fit, obviously connected to both Caleb Martin and Bam Adebayo from their North Carolina roots there. So I think there's a possible link there. And he's definitely a Heat culture guy in terms of bringing that defensive intensity.
Does he know J. Cole?
Yes,
apparently that helps. Okay.
He absolutely knows J. Cole, yeah.
Howard, any names that come to mind for you?
I had Dennis Smith Jr. on my dark horse list. It was a one name list. Dark horse, Dennis Smith Jr. I love that. No, I thought of him too only because they're also good with reclamation projects. Oh, yeah. And being defense first and just having something to prove. And everybody's got to be on their best behavior if you're a member of the Miami Heat because of hashtag Heat culture. And I think like that's a good landing spot. I also think, by the way, given what we were just talking about with how tight the money's going to be this summer, you might just get him for the minimum.
Yeah.
So he's also gettable. You want me to go with like traditional, obvious Heat culture type guys who are vets that they may or may not be able to get, or do you want me to go with a little weird or a little just
go weird?
All right. My 2 weirdest, Dylan Brooks.
Okay.
Who in a lot of ways is not hashtag Heat culture, but has like the irrationality.
He's got that dog in him.
And like he's got that dog in him. They would love all of the most obnoxious aspects of him if they could corral it enough and channel it right. And that if Heat culture means anything, that's what you do, right? You take Dylan Brooks.
You were saying obnoxious aspects, and I wonder if you were going to go somewhere else with that when you were talking about Dylan Brooks. Sorry.
I'm not sure how Locked On's policy on cursing goes, but
that would infringe upon it, I think.
He'd be an interesting one as well.
I had Dylan Brooks on the top of my list. I don't know how the Heat would do it. Again, they could do these salary dumps, maybe get a portion of the mid-level exception. Yeah. I don't know. It sounds like Houston might put a bag at him, but yeah. Dylan Brooks is a great Heat culture fit, I think, for all the same reasons you said, Howard. They've taken flyers on guys before. Jimmy Butler, for instance.
Hassan Whiteside.
Hassan Whiteside. Even a couple years ago with
Dion Waiters.
Dion Waiters. So I think that's a good one. I'm going to throw out a couple here that are sort of minimum level guys that I think make sense. Damian Lee. If they do end up losing somebody like Max Strus, Damian Lee shot 47% or something like crazy from 3-point range last year. He's a veteran, championship experience, well-liked in the locker room, and does the things that the Heat did well to get to the finals last year, which is don't make mistakes. Maybe don't do anything spectacular, but just don't beat yourself. Damian Lee is kind of a mistake-free player, even if he's unspectacular, and he can make open shots, and the Heat do a good job of generating open shots. So that's one. And then I'm just going to throw one more out there. And this is not very interesting, but I think it's a name to keep an eye on, is Darius Days, who the Heat signed as an undrafted free agent last year, brought into training camp, and then had him for media day and all these things. And then right before the season started, waived him quite surprisingly. And then he ends up in the G League with, I think, the Rockets affiliate, ends up being one of the best players in the G League, shoots 37% on threes. The Heat obviously liked him enough to bring him in early in the last season and have him through Summer League. He was also one of the top Summer League performers. Didn't like him enough to keep him, but maybe they could circle the wagons again. Maybe they can kind of come back to Darius Days.
Are you allowed to call him undrafted? I mean, that's kind of a sensitive issue.
Yes. We've been here. We've been here long enough. We're not the national media just parachuting in with stale storylines, Howard.
It's just us national media aspects who can't use that term. I like that one because it's way off the board. I can tell you for sure I did not see that coming. I could have named 50,000 players before I would have expected that. I have two other weird ones. Robin Lopez.
Oh, now you're talking to David here. All right.
Come off the bench and beat the crap out
of
Jokic if you see him again, like that kind of thing. Just apply some hard fouls, rebound, take a little bit of give Bam a little bit of a breather on the boards.
I think Bernie, the Heat mascot, took enough of a beating from Conor McGregor, so I don't know if you want Robin Lopez on the team too. But I mean, I'd love to see him
here.
Fair point. I don't think Conor McGregor should ever be allowed back in that arena for all kinds of reasons.
Miami-Dade County, for that matter.
Or Miami-Dade County. The other one I thought of, this. Tell me what you guys think of this, because he's definitely going on a minimum if he's still in the league. What about Derrick Rose?
I like it. Everybody who has ever been in a locker room with Derrick Rose, anybody who's ever coached him or any front office executive has ever executived Derrick Rose, loves Derrick Rose. And I think he would be like with Kevin Love last year, they welcome these kind of veterans, guys who are well liked in locker rooms, and it kind of does something for them both ways. I don't know. Derrick Rose, that to me is very interesting.
I think he can still play, and I think he can still contribute. You don't want to rely on him for big minutes or anything, but as a member of this rotating cast of guys at point guard or whatever guard. And then the other one I thought of, like there's a few others I thought of, but like I don't know how much Jeff Green gets. So he probably just re-ups with Denver. The other Green, Danny. I'm a big Danny Green guy. He's it takes a while to recover from the ACL, so he couldn't really contribute a ton once he finally came back this past season, but. Another several months of recovery, 3-and-D guy, about all the right things, has won championships. Like Danny Green is a perfect Miami Heat guy.
Yeah, I agree.
Wing length and versatility, what Pat Riley was talking. I mean, versatility, but whatever.
I think the Jeff Green one, I mean, he's a local guy too. He lives here, so it makes so much sense. And now that he's won his championship in Denver.
How has he not already played there?
Yeah, that's
all the teams he's played for. He's
played for everyone but Miami.
Haslam has been here.
He's due. He's due. You're up in the rotation.
Yeah, that's it. Any other ones, David, that you had on your list before we get out of
here? Mason Plumlee, I think, is a guy. I think he's. I mean, if you wind up not taking a flyer on Cody Zeller as much as you might have appreciated what minutes he gave you, according to Pat Riley, I think Plumlee's still a little bit better. Maybe I don't know if he's an option for Miami, but I think I'd like to see that one. If you need a backup center, I mean, obviously you're going to have Kevin Love there, so you're going to juggle that triumvirate there of Love, Plumlee, Zeller, Jeff Green. I mean, so many different options at the center position. So
one other name that's floating out there, Goran Dragic. I mean, that guy just like is a walking Heat culture avatar. I don't know.
Is he still playing? I feel like he was like semi-retired almost.
It would be fun to just bring him back for a year. Udonis Haslam leaves. You bring back Dragic for a year. I don't know. It would just be fun as like the 15th man. I don't think they would be able to play him though.
I think Heat fans think it's a foregone conclusion that Goran comes back at least for one more season before he retires.
Maybe. I'll take the $1.5 million. All right. That'll do it for us today. Thanks so much to Howard Beck. Of course, you can hear him all over the place on the Locked On Podcast Network, as he mentioned earlier on a recent episode of The Low Post. And you can read his stuff over at GQ. Howard, thanks so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thanks.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Everydayers, we're going to be back tomorrow with cap expert Keith Smith to break down the new CBA, what's possible for the Heat and free agency. So hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.